Hello YouTube. I was watching a video about black consciousness, and this was, I assume, a black American who was saying that all black people should never forget about slavery. And I just wanted to state my position on such an issue. I lived in the USA for 2 years. I was a student in Michigan, and one thing I realized when I lived there is that it seems like black people are different depending on which part of the world they're from. And when I say different, I don't mean racially or genetically or whatever, no, but I mean culturally different. Black Zimbabweans, for example, where I'm from, think in a certain way, whereas black British people think in a certain way. You go to Afro-Caribbeans, same thing, and then you go to African Americans, again, they think differently, and Canadians think differently, and you can go on and on and on. But one thing I noticed with black Americans and Afro-Caribbeans is what I believe to be a destructive mentality, of which there is this constant need to be conscious about things that happened a few hundred years ago, things that don't even directly affect you anymore. You see, I understand that black people shouldn't forget about slavery in the same way Jews should never forget about the Holocaust, or Zimbabweans should never forget about apartheid. But even so, we can learn some great lessons from history on what not forgetting can actually do to a society. We can go to Zimbabwe and we can look at the current situation there. We can go to South Africa once more and see the race tensions. And you see, the reason why things like that still exist, simply because people do not want to forget about things that happened generations ago. You see, in the situation of Zimbabwe, it's different because apartheid only ended about 29 years ago. South Africa, it only ended about, I think, 14 years ago. But then if you look at slavery, you see that slavery ended over 100 or 200 years ago. But when you meet an average black American or Afro-Caribbean person, you will always see that sense of anger, even though that person hasn't experienced racism or even slavery in any way, shape or form. And then therefore, this is what I suggest for people out there. It is simply that we need to move on as a race, as a people, in the same way Jews have moved on, in the same way South Africans have moved on, or Zimbabweans are trying to move on. We should try and move on from, the ills of the past, and we should realize that we're not actually living in the past anymore. We should realize that, let's say, the Roman Empire, when it expanded, it colonized Britain, colonized most of Europe, and most of Asia Minor. But you don't see British people today angry about the Romans, for example. It's something that ended a long time ago, and it doesn't affect the average British or the average French person. And therefore you see that countries like Britain will move on. If you look at all the different societies in the world that fail to move on simply because of things that happened in the past, it is startling to see that those very people are the same people who are stuck in the Stone Ages. When I lived in America, I realized the poorest people in American society seem to be black people. And it is true that the effects of the pre-civil rights movement in America, where black people didn't have as many rights as white people, even all the way through slavery, of course, they did add to the problem and are partly the cause to black poverty around the world. But yet again, you look at it and you see 90% of the reason why there is so much black poverty is simply because it is black people who actually don't want to go to school. They don't want to go to university. They would rather sell drugs. They would rather do crime. It is the very same black people who are steeped in superstition and all these different things, where you realize that if our society is to move on, we are the ones to move on. We, the people in contemporary society. It is not for the white man to sit there and say, oh yes, truly, I am sorry for slavery, or to say that, yes, I really wronged you during slavery. It is not for that to actually happen. It is actually for the black person to stand up and say, wait a minute, let me remove this slavery mentality from my consciousness and let me move on as a proud black person. And it is for the Chinese person to say, you know what, let me remove this mentality of we were once colonized by the British, and let me say I'm a proud Chinese person. Let the South African, let the Zimbabwean say I am proud, and I am not beholden to apartheid. Let the British person say, wait a minute, I'm proud. I'm not beholden to the Roman Empire anymore, even though they colonized my ancestors a few thousand years ago. That is the mentality that we need to have. The thing that the black person needs to realize is that there is no race on earth that has never been persecuted. All those white Americans that you see in the United States, their ancestors were also subject to some sort of abuse. And that is the very reason why the United States as a country was formed. And you can move on to the Latin Americans. There's a reason why they're in poverty as well, e.g. Spanish colonization. But maybe they need to recognize that we are proud Latin American people and we need to move on. That is what I think the black person needs to realize, that slavery and wrongdoing didn't just affect a black person. It affected all of humanity at some stage and at some form. And we just need to remove it from our consciousness. We need to remove it from our day-to-day lives. Yes, we need to remember it as our history, but it shouldn't be in your consciousness that my ancestors were once in slavery and therefore I need to live differently because of that. So yeah.